So I have never been someone who has campaigned to destroy the BBC. I have always been one of those who has said that the ideal of a public service broadcasting company which is impartial, accurate, honest, truthful, decent, such a broadcaster would be of immense value to any democracy. So the ideal of the BBC is an excellent ideal, and I have always argued for reform. But the problem is that reform seems to be taking an awful long time, and it's not apparent to me there has been reform. So I think we're approaching the point at which I am coming to the view that unless there is real reform of the BBC within the next couple of years, it's time to say sayonara, because you cannot have the dishonesty in the organisation is this, that it proclaims itself to be impartial and honest, but it's not impartial, and that's the worst of both worlds. The Telegraph, the Times, the Guardian, these organisations don't need to proclaim that they're impartial, because they don't have to be. They're entitled to their view. Let them have it. And let them be honest and open about it. You know, the Guardian's a left-wing newspaper, Telegraph's a right-wing newspaper. Fine. That's exactly right. People know what they're getting into. The danger comes when you've got an organisation like the BBC which says, we have no side, we are impartial, and yet it does have a side, and it's not impartial. It's very partisan. And that's a danger. And part of the problem is that the BBC has this enormous and worldwide reputation. And it is one of the best known brands in the world. And in broadcasting terms, I should think probably it's as big a brand as there is in the whole world in terms of broadcasting. And so for it to be proclaiming itself as impartial whilst doing something which is clearly not impartial is defrauding people. It's fooling people into thinking this is an organisation which is something which it is not. So very sadly, I'm coming round to the view that the BBC, the licence fee should be ended. There's other reasons for that anyway. I mean, the fact is that, you know, when the BBC began, which was 100 years ago last year, actually, so in 1922 the BBC started as an organisation. And in those days, because of the limitations of the technology, the number of wavelengths available to broadcasters was very limited. And they were only able to broadcast on what was called long wave or medium wave, which, if you know anything about radio technology, these waves travel a long distance. They're a long wavelength. So the European nations got together in Geneva, and there was a treaty which allocated wavelengths to Germany, wavelengths to France, wavelengths to Britain. And we only got one wavelength. So it was a monopoly service. And it was a monopoly service for which the license fee is a monopoly payment system. And that made perfect sense. If we only had one radio station in the country, which everyone had to listen to, everyone should pay for it. I've got no problem with that. It was absolutely right and obvious that that was so. Now, with the proliferation of broadcasting platforms, you know, the infinite number of stations that you can have, the logic of the license fee has been undermined, and there are lots of people, of course, Lee, you'll know this, that a lot of people who actually don't watch the BBC, don't use BBC services, and yet they're supposed to pay for it. And that doesn't seem right or equitable or logical even. So I think that for that reason, if for no other reason, the era of the license fee is coming to an end. It's already in sight. We're all awaiting, as we speak. We've been waiting actually for 6 months, or I have been, to hear what the government is going to pronounce on this subject. There's a review underway at the moment, which has been looking at the BBC and its future method of funding. So it'll be very interesting to see what they come up with.